Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
Okay, remember when Michael said you never know what to expect at these meetings? I'm about to show you why he said that. All right, so I'm Rahasya-Mt. You can hashtag Rahasya Uncensored and pull up a lot of what I do. My wife and I, we do the LotusGuide magazine. I have a radio show called Spiritual Activist on BBS Radio. And I like to reach out and find some of the underlying reasons that why are we so separated? And when you get to the point of being resilient, why aren't we resilient? And I think it's because so many of us feel separated as individuals and we don't see the unity at a deeper level. A while back, I wrote a book called To Believe or Not to Believe, and the subtitle was The Social and Neurological Consequences of Belief Systems. While I was writing that book, I was privy to really research religion and politics and basically our world history. And I noticed that on the surface level, we seem so different and isolated. But I noticed with religions in particularly, if you go back in time and see where those writings originally came from, they start going into more of a unified field. And if you go down even deeper, it gets into another realm, which science is now catching up to. And this brings me to the topic that I'd like to talk about. And it has to do with something that scientists have been looking at. And if you ask most scientists, come up with an explanation right now, what's your best guess is our reality? Well, the popular consensus is our reality is a holographic reality. In other words, a simulation. Now, whether the person doing the projecting is a god or the matrix designer or the great spirit, you could call it a lot of things, but it seems like there is a process going on that is really, really similar to a holographic projection. And one of the things that brings this up and makes it really clear is, first of all, if we were in a matrix, if we're living in a holographic projection, how would we know that? Every single thing that we would use to gauge that and to try to research it is also from the hologram, the simulation. And it is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. It's an illusion. So everything that we would try to gauge it with would also be part of the illusion. So of course it's going to look real. If we're having a dream, in the dream, if we start looking at the dream from the dream state, it looks totally real. So how would we tell if we're actually in a simulation? One of the ways is to see if there's anything underneath the fabric of space that science could tell us. And lo and behold, there is. If you look at the absolute bottom, the atomic and subatomic structure of life, Professor James Gates found an interesting thing, because if you look at the process of what happens on a subatomic level, you can get that process and turn it into an equation. And the equation is very, very long, but I won't even say the whole thing, but the equation is an error-correcting block code. Now, the error-correcting block code is how nature keeps itself intact, from the seed to the whole process. There is an equation that explains that, and it's a very, very definite equation. So one of the people on his staff said, hey, that equation looks a little familiar. And lo and behold, that equation is the same exact equation that we use on the internet when we send an email. That equation grabs all of our data, all of our information, holds it intact, and puts it through because we're going through satellites and fiber optics and wires. If this equation didn't work right, we wouldn't get the same data at the receiving end as we do at the transmitting end. Now, why would we come up with the same exact equation that life uses if there isn't a similarity of the same process? This is leading everybody to believe that this is a simulation. And if I had time, I could go into it. There's probably 10 different things that really show us clearly that we're living in a holographic universe. Now, why is this important? Because in a hologram comes from one image. And as that image goes out, you can take any part of that image and create the whole. Well, we do the same thing. We are a direct reflection of the universe in the same way that every DNA in our system could build another me, another you. It is the same holographic process. And this becomes important because if we can recognize this, this undercuts all of the feelings of individuality and separation that we feel in the world. We are part of one unified field. Religions call it God. Everything has a name for it, but it is a unified field of consciousness. And if we can understand this on a nuts and bolts level, where we can actually see an equation, it will help us understand and go deeper into the aspect of why we feel so separate. Why do we feel like all of you sitting out here? It is really, really an illusion that we are separate. We are part of one thing, one being, one consciousness, one energy. That becomes really important to recognize, because if that's true, we are part of one data stream of information, and that data stream goes both ways. So if I'm doing my, whatever it is, prayers or meditation to get in touch with that deeper aspect of myself and really doing the inner work, I'm connecting with that data stream. At that point, my thoughts become very, very important, because in a holographic projection, if you take one part of the hologram, pull it out, it'll reproduce the whole hologram. But if you change that one little aspect, it will change all of the other aspects of that hologram and bleed back up into the main holographic projection. This is why and how we can change this world, by doing the work on ourselves and being conscientious, doing the inner work and the outer work. Events like this are really important. You know, this gentleman here is taking a piece of land and bringing it back. Other people are looking out for us with the forest and our environment and our water and everything, and we're all doing everything that we can possibly do. And it's really important to see how this process can really wake us all up to our inner divinity, however you want to put it. And it has nothing to do with religion as we see it in the everyday world. It's become so conflictive out there. Most of the wars are religious holy wars. Politics does nothing but divide us. We need a new way to think about life. We need a new way to see ourselves, our place in this world, and in reality itself. And I think if we can do that, we'll have a really good shot at saving ourselves. Because right now, we cannot continue to do the game the way we've been doing it. If we continue down this road, we're done for. Okay? It's not going to work. We have to back up, reevaluate, get away from the corporate news and start going into the independent media sources like this, my magazine. There's a bunch of radio shows out there, YouTubes. If you get in there and do your work, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work to get out there and find out what's going on. And it takes a certain amount of courage too. And that takes heart, which is actually courage is the French word for courage. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of determination, and a lot of will. And that's what we're missing in this world. You know, a lot of us, we know what to do. We know the right thing to do. We just don't have the will to do it. Apathy will be the thing that will bury us if we're not careful. So becoming an activist, doing events like this, talking to people, getting people to think. Like, I'm not necessarily wanting to tell somebody what to think. That's going to be up to them after they get the information. I just want people to think. Start thinking instead of just sitting around letting information come into you from a corporate media source, and that all have an agenda. And we read our history books, but history is written by the victors. We have to remember this and start reaching out for new information and new ways to live and new ways to be. And I think I could probably go on for quite a while, but sure. Imagine this is another area where science can really help us. This is in biology. A friend of actually Michael and ours, Bruce Lipton. He's an amazing person. Just look him up. Matter of fact, if you look up Bruce Lipton and Tom Campbell, it'll pull up an amazing conversation they had. But what they found in biology is something really, really unique and really important, because if you want to know what's going on in the world and what is happening, what are we doing, it looks so chaotic. But there's something that happens in nature that can maybe clarify this a little bit. We all know about the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and we've just accepted that as a transformational analogy, a metaphor for our inner transformation. But what sciences have been doing lately is looking at right when the caterpillar, for unbeknownst reason to himself, starts hanging upside down and making a chrysalis. Now, inside that chrysalis is, if you open it up at a certain point, it's just goop. It's so chaotic that you would think there's no life form there at all, because it's complete chaos. But what they know now is they have imaginal cells strategically placed throughout that chaos. And those imaginal cells hold the pattern of the butterfly. And around those imaginal cells, they know now that all of the other cells start forming to it to form the butterfly. And I think the reason this is so important is because we are imaginal cells. What you're doing is an imaginal cell doing this, because you're creating not what was, not what is, but what you know can be. And if we all do this, we can create a better world by going inside, because we know that we can do something much, much better. We are imaginal cells that could be creating a much better world around us. And as we look at the chaos around us, remembering that that's the old caterpillar regime breaking down, and it should. Everything should break down at this point and reform itself into something completely new. So when somebody tells me, well, maybe we could fix this, I say, no, we don't want to fix something that got us in this position in the first place. We have to really, really think about dismantling this whole thing we call our civilization and how we do things. Like if it's too big to fail, if it's too big to fail, it shouldn't even be. We need smaller units, smaller communities coming together and being more reliant on each other. So that's the imaginal cells. So I think that would probably do for what I have to say today. And if you want to know any more about us, LotusGuide.com. And Michael always has a section in here where he writes about the Golden Road television. And I always have a section, Rahasya Uncensored. The last one was, why should we be questioning our answers? It's easy. Almost all the answers we've ever been given, I'm old enough now to see that they're wrong. Everything I've been told by well-meaning parents, professors, teachers, priests, and preachers, and historians ends up not being the truth. And as we dig deeper, it gets dismantling and a little scary sometimes, but this is the adventure of being a spiritual warrior, a spiritual activist, and going out there and participating in life. So, thank you very much. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.